Hey everybody, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from just below the glaciers that feed into Lake Louise in Alberta, Canada. The other big news that happened today is that there is now an official trade block from the United States on airline sales, airframe sales to China. In the aftermath of the Chinese little snit fit when Speaker Pelosi went to Taiwan and they basically started threatening everybody. The Defense Department decided that that is a step too far and that civilian aviation transfer technologies should no longer be allowed to the Chinese. And so today the Chinese are throwing sanctions on Boeing. Boeing has a number of planes that they already made for the Chinese that were kind of in abeyance that are no longer going to China anymore. And we are at the start of a firm technological split between China and the United States. Now, some version of this was already in progress in other sectors, specifically semiconductors. Because of new regulations that have been sketched out by the Biden administration that are basically taking Trump's texts and making them into permanent policy, the Chinese can no longer import any of the equipment that is necessary to make high and medium quality chips, and they can't import the high quality chips at all. Or more to the point, American sellers of this stuff that you can either sell to the Chinese government or you can sell to the US government. You can't do both anymore. And so for American companies, that's kind of the same as a ban. The debate going on, not just in Washington, but in the Netherlands and in Britain and Japan, is to how far down to go on this scale. So can you still sell medium quality chips to the Chinese? Can you still sell the gear that's necessary to make the low quality chips? All of this is now on the table, and I expect we're going to see stricter and stricter restrictions. And the Chinese have proven over and over and over again that they can't manufacture any of this stuff on their own. Yes, one guy did manage to develop a 7-nanometer chip, and good for him, but that's kind of like Aristotle. So you have one dude. Translating that into the overall system is something the Chinese have proven over and over and over again that is just beyond them. They can't even make the gear for the low-end chip manufacturer. So, just as we're having a divorce economically between the Germans and the Russians, we are now past the point of no return between the Chinese and the Americans. So I've been warning a lot of my clients for a couple years now that this was coming, and it's time to get your people out and your technology out and cash out however you can. At this point, because the Chinese are doing counter sanctions, it's probably too late for anyone who has remained, and it's time to start writing down all of your assets in the People's Republic to zero. I mean, you might be able to get a little bit out, but you should count on the entire corporate relationship collapsing over the course of the next year or three. We're at that point now. That's the bad news for the Chinese. There's some good news. There was a summit yesterday in Kazakhstan between the Russians, the Chinese, and a handful of other countries that really don't matter to the strategic equation, in which Putin basically caved to everything the Chinese have ever wanted. Russia is so bereft for friends because of the Ukraine war. China's really all that's left that matters. And so China's been able to exact a very, very heavy price for very, very few concessions. In essence, on live television, Putin was forced to read Chinese talking points on everything that the Chinese care about, whether it's technology or the United States or naval issues or Taiwan, and to read it in the Chinese syntax. So basically, from a diplomatic point of view, this is the public equivalent of being down on your knees licking boots. And Putin had to do it all. And at the end of it, the Chinese didn't even really give anything back. There will be no tech transfer. There will be no weapons transfer. There will be no troops. Putin actually asked for troops. And all that the Russians are going to have is the right to sell raw commodities to the Chinese at a horrific discount, probably in most cases more than 30 or 40%. So the Chinese have basically turned Russia into a more loyal satrapy than North Korea has been, and that will absolutely have strategic consequences for both countries down the line. But the Chinese realize that while nationalism is a fun tool, you do not muck with the United States when national security is an issue, because they're already seeing that on semiconductors and aerospace and very soon energy and agriculture and automotive. So the Russians didn't get anything that they were asking for except for diplomatic support. Okay, that's it from me. I'll send you something from the glacier. Take care. Hey everyone, Peter Zeihan here, coming to you from Colorado. I've been going out of my way to not talk about the energy situation in the Ukraine war because so much has changed in the last 2 months, and I wanted to kind of get a good overhaul. We're still not at a point where I can give you a really firm prediction on too much of anything, but I do want to point out a couple of basic things about energy markets. Energy markets are so volatile because demand tends to be inelastic. So like if you say you need a gallon of gas to get from home to work and you can only get 3/4 of a gallon, You don't go to work, so you have to scrimp and save and hoodwink and steal in order to get that extra quarter of a gallon, otherwise your life falls apart. It's very similar for industrial needs to make petrochemicals or heating for your house. You either have it or you don't, and you are going to pay through the nose to get that last little bit. That means most of the pricing power in most energy markets comes from the cost structure and the pricing power of the marginal supplier. So whoever produces that last extra 1, 2, or 3%, they're the ones who set the market price for everything. Now, what that means in the case of the Ukraine war and the situation in Europe is the Russians have gone from providing baseload cheap energy to the European continent to suddenly removing themselves from the market. So the marginal suppliers in Europe are now setting the price. Even worse, you're talking at somewhere, based on the country, somewhere between 10 and 30% of total energy now has to come from somewhere else. So a lot has been made of the Germans bringing on these new liquefied natural gas regasification facilities so they can bring in LNG from different continents. And a lot has been made of the Europeans being able to reduce their demand by 10, 15%. These are all relevant things. And the Germans have been able to get their storage back up to 85%. And these are all good things. But that means there will be enough supply, but it will be at a very different cost structure, because now 10 to 30% of the supply is coming from new marginal suppliers who are much farther away with much higher cost structures. As a rule, liquefied natural gas is the most expensive way to move natural gas from one place to another, because you have to basically freeze it into a liquid, put it into a specialized tanker, ship it across an ocean, unload it at another specialized facility that can then regasify it and put it in your system. And in the case of Germany, they're using ships to do that last step, which is also the most expensive way to do it. So the cost structure for this new stuff is 2, 3, 4, 5 times as much as what the Russians used to sell their natural gas to Europe for. And that sets the price structure for the entire natural gas market, heating market, industrial energy market, and electricity market. So on the good hand, yes, the Europeans are unlikely to see the lights actually go out because of a lack of material. That's great. They're going to see it go out because of a price level that no one can afford. Now, the only way you can deal with this is by reducing marginal demand. You're talking about everyone needing to cut their energy consumption by about 10 to 30%. Right now, the Europeans are a little ahead of the schedule on that, but they haven't had to shut down anything from an industrial point of view, and that is coming. One of the key things to remember is that Germany is not like the United States. In the United States, we're relatively agnostic about where we get our energy, domestic versus foreign, coal versus natural gas versus solar versus wind. And because of that, no marginal supplier in the national market is able to really dictate prices, because there's always a replacement system. Well, the Germans are removing nuclear from the mix, and the Russians have removed natural gas from the mix, and other countries have coal or nuclear. Germany doesn't have any of that. So they're all being supplied by marginal suppliers right now. And if you go into winter, when demand skyrockets because it's cold in the winter, you know that the prices are going to go through the roof, even if supplies are not in danger. What that means is in Germany, we have a very big problem coming up, not just because we're going to be seeing blackouts or brownouts or high prices, but in order to crush that demand, the German government's going to have a very clear choice to make. Let their people freeze in the dark or reduce industrial demand. And unlike the United States, where we're very agnostic about where we get our petrochemicals and what fuel sources go into it, because the Germans have removed so many things from the equation, they use Russian natural gas to fuel their petrochemicals to provide the base for their heavy and medium manufacturing. And if you remove that from the mix, that is the end of the German manufacturing model. I would be shocked if Germany was not already in recession, and this winter, when this system breaks down, that means we're going to have an industrial recession in Germany and every country that participates in that industrial system. That includes the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and probably a couple that I didn't mention just because I forgot. So we are looking at the end of what makes the heart of German manufacturing and the European economy work this winter. Okay, that's it for me. Until next time.